Okay, Sydney, thanks for joining me. So my idea for this kind of podcast was rather than research all there is to know about you and have loads of questions prepared, go in a little bit blind and just have a conversation with the fellow person who's passionate about cycling and learn about you from you.
Perfect. Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for giving me some of your, excuse me. Thanks for giving me some time out of your day. Um, so I suppose the first thing to do would be if you can just, I suppose, introduce yourself and just tell me a little bit how cycling is involved in your life and how you got into cycling.
Yeah. I'm Sydney. I have been into cycling, I guess, relatively new within the last 5 or 6 years. So I didn't necessarily grow up with it as a kid, though I did kind of have exposure as a kid in the sense of just playing in the front yard type of deal on bikes. So
Mm-hmm.
I was the type of kid that tried to find, the steepest driveway in the neighborhood to get down on it on my bike kind of deal.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then of course come home to my mom with bruised up knees and all that fun stuff. So yeah, I would say cycling was, you know, very much just a, thing I had as a kid just playing around in the neighborhood. Didn't necessarily have it in a formal sense or a mountain biking sense. And then, um, yeah, and then in college, I got a hardtail and used that to commute around classes and that kind of thing. And then I attempted to take it on some trails, but it didn't really work out all too well. And then I actually, right before my senior year of college, I got a wine internship in the Pacific Northwest, which I was going to school in Arizona at the time, and then took this wine internship right before my last year of undergrad. I was studying civil engineering at the time and just kind of wanted to do something new before I graduated.
Yeah.
So I took up this wine internship, and it just happened to be in this small town called Hood River, Oregon, which is about an hour east of Portland, Oregon. And yeah, I showed up not really knowing much about the area and went there primarily for this internship, which was amazing. But Hood River's actually got a ton of mountain biking. And I wasn't into really mountain biking at the time and didn't know that. And so I kind of got introduced to it through moving here, which I now still currently live in that area. And I was actually at a industry night, which is just, yeah, it's an industry night. And
So
I
wine
was
as
talking.
in like the drink wine?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So the drink wine. So I was, yeah, working at a winery slash vineyard.
Okay.
And yeah, I was at an industry night, and another winemaker in town was super into mountain biking. And we were just talking about it. And I was, attracted to it. So I was like, oh, I'd love to go mountain biking, with your group of friends sometime. He's like, great. Do you have a mountain bike? And I was like, absolutely not. And he's like, well, you can actually borrow one of our friends. So I borrowed a mountain bike from one of their friends, which was so generous at the time, thinking back
Yeah.
on it all. And when I first met them, it was a full suspension bike. I had no idea about full suspension bikes. And so they were like, well, you're probably going to want to set, the suspension, your body weight, all that stuff. And I just kind of looked at them super bewildered and was like,
Yeah.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm just going to jump on this and see what happens. So yeah, that's exactly what happened. And went on some rides with them, and then they were super generous and actually let me borrow that mountain bike all summer. So I pretty much went out every day I could that summer. The vineyard I was working at was right next to our main mountain biking area called Post Canyon. So I'd sometimes just go straight from the vineyard to the, trail system right behind the vineyard, and sometimes went with groups of people, sometimes went alone, and just kind of figured it out that summer, which was about 5 years ago. So long story short, that's kind of my or background with cycling, was kind of just within the last 5 years or so. And yeah, it just kind of fell into my lap a little bit.
Awesome. Like
Yeah.
it seems to be with a lot of people that they just, once they start going to college, they get a bike just primarily as kind of commuting, and then it just kind of explodes from there. But it was pretty cool that you got a job with somebody else that was pretty big into mountain biking, and then you had so there was trails really close to the actual vineyard behind you as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is also kind of a crazy coincidence. Yeah, the vineyard where I was living at the time was, the probably the closest property to our main mountain biking trail system. So it was
That's
also
just
just kind of
perfect.
coincidence how that worked out. Yeah, totally. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
pretty
Because I
awesome.
didn't even have a car that summer, so it made it really easy.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's and were you far from home to get to work? Were you using your bike to commute every day to work, and then just hit the trails after work, and then cycle home again? Did you just live on your bike?
Kind of. In college, I did. Yeah, I didn't really have a car in college. Towards the end of college, I did, but for most of college, I didn't. So in Arizona, I basically was using, yeah, my hardtail to commute to school and that kind of thing. And then during that summer internship period in the Hood River area, I didn't have a car. So, but I was living on the vineyard. So
Okay.
yeah, I would use like the company's truck sometimes to get, go places, but for the most part I was kind of living where I worked, so I didn't actually have to commute all too much, which was nice because biking around Hood River is actually quite difficult. Everything's kind of spread out.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, it's kind of a rural community, so getting anywhere if you don't live in town is quite difficult
Hmm.
without a car. So, yeah, I kind of lived where I worked, which worked out at the time. But now I definitely have a car to get around.
That's always a plus. What got you or got your attention with wine? What was it that brought you towards like working in that industry?
Yeah, that was also kind of random. Because
Like,
like I said before, I was
uh,
studying engineering and I'm still working in engineering now,
okay.
but I think I was really close to burning out on the whole engineering thing. I was kind of at the end of my degree or close to the end of my degree, and I was really
Hmm.
looking forward to just doing something totally different before I finished school. So that, and I had an interest in wine and the winemaking process, and kind of just wanted to learn about it and get my feet wet before I totally transitioned into, the engineering field. So I kind of felt like that summer was my time to go, learn about it, live on a vineyard if I could, which I
Yeah.
did, and that worked out really well for me. But yeah, the wine thing it was kind of random at the time, just kind of wanting to do something new at the time.
And did you ever organize like awesome wine, cheese, and biking nights from the vineyard?
Yeah. Oh, yes and no. Not at the time. Maybe personally, not formally.
Okay.
Um, and after that summer, I did kind of work a side job where I did wine and bike tours, which was pretty fun. It was the summer after that summer internship. So we would basically bike people between three different wineries in the area, and there was, yeah, wine, cheese, food, all involved in kind of a bike tour type setting. So yeah, not at that time, but yeah, later on I did kind of more formal um, thing like that.
Cool. And so what
Mhm.
kind of style of cycling mainly that you do? Is it purely mountain biking, or do you ever dabble in like off-road or road or anything else like that?
Yeah, I would say primarily mountain biking. Yeah, I have not done a ton of road cycling here and there because there is a lot of good road cycling around us. But not, yeah, I would say mountain biking is primarily my, um, I guess, niche or where I spend my time. So the area that I live in has a lot of jumps. And so I've always been kind of a believer that you're kind of a product of your environment. And
Yeah.
so I got in kind of this jumping realm of mountain biking mainly just through living here. And that's the type of trails we have in Post Canyon. There's not
Uh-huh.
a ton of technical features like rocks or roots. It's very manicured, pretty jump lines
Yeah.
everywhere. And so, yeah, I was just kind of a product of my environment and got into, I would say, a more jumping type specific riding through just where I lived. And then, yeah, that's kind of translated over to places that I travel. Mountain biking wise, I like to ride jump line oriented trails. And then same with trail building. I do quite a bit of trail building, and that kind of translates over to the style of trail building I'm involved with too. So yeah, I would say that's kind of the style of riding I am into.
And are you working with kind of a local organization when you go out trail building, or how does it work in your area? Because here in Ireland, like the vast majority of mountain bike trails are unsanctioned, but they know they're
Mhm.
there, so they don't really do anything about it. And once you don't go build anything crazy that somebody's going to kill themselves on, they're kind of
Right.
ignored as long as you behave yourself. But there are proper trail centers as well. So, but they're usually built by the crew that are hired in by the local government purely and specifically to do that. So, like,
Mhm.
you wouldn't just have anybody come in and help build the trails. But like, what kind of trail building
Mhm.
do you do?
Yeah, I would say both. We have really, really good infrastructure where we live when it comes to getting involved in like the local trail system. So if and that is in a sanctioned sense. So we have a whole trail association locally that, sets trail building days and, anyone from the community can come get involved in those days
Awesome.
and help out with various different trails. Different people are trail adopters, so they kind of own the trails. Sometimes if you go to other places, you see a company own a trail or
Okay.
a road or whatever. So it's kind of like that, but an individual normally is the trail adopter, and then kind of runs the crew um, when it comes to the trail building days. So yeah, there's good local infrastructure for getting involved trail building wise, and then I do my own unsanctioned stuff. But I probably won't dive into that too
No,
deeply over the
no, no.
podcast.
I don't know what you're talking about. No, of course. No, there's no
Yeah, right?
unsanctioned trails.
Right, never.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's great that they kind of have that ethos behind it where anybody can kind of come out and help, and at least then they're contributing towards the trails that they then get to ride. But can you explain a little bit more about the trail adopter? So is that like somebody just decides, right, this is my section of trail, I'm going to put in loads of effort, I'm going to organize everything, and this will be my baby, or do they actually own the land that the trail is on, or what way does that work?
Yeah, they don't own the land. In our local trail system, the county owns the land, and I'm not actually entirely sure how they figured out who is going to be the adopter. I think a lot of times it's the person that has had experience building in that local trail system and is passionate about adopting that particular trail. So I think if you
Hmm.
wanted to kind of be the trail adopter and make that particular trail your baby, you could. And then, yeah, you would basically be like, oh, my trail is needing a ton of work this fall. There's tons of new down trees, this, that. I'm going to
Yeah.
plan a, trail building day and, post it to the public. And then a lot of times there'll be like food or beer provided, and yeah, people, and then tools are a lot of times provided too. And yeah, anyone can come out and help out
Cool.
on that trail during that trail building party or day. So yeah, I feel like a lot of that goes on. Last spring, I actually did an all women's trail building party on one of our trails, which was awesome because I kind of incorporated education as an aspect to it as well. Because a lot of ladies had come out that had never actually done any trail building before.
Yeah.
And we were working on a trail that is already existing and kind of needed some prior background knowledge on how to work on it well and, keep it more or less in its same form, but make it better. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah, education is kind of an aspect of the trail building party, which I think was super valuable for some people that have, never ever trail built before.
Yeah.
And if there had been ladies that have trail built before, then like kind of put them in charge of their own group and kind of break out into smaller groups, and everyone kind of had a different feature that they were working on or cleaning up and that kind of thing. So yeah, there's good infrastructure, and if you wanted to do a trail build party or be an adopter of a trail, there's kind of a place for that, which is nice.
That sounds pretty cool. It's a great way to run it, I think, because any of the real trail centers here, like probably for liability issues and things like that, they wouldn't let anybody go in and actually work on the trails. But a lot of the woods that would have unsanctioned trails would still be kind of government land, usually forest
Mhm.
plantations or just an old forest that they can't cut down because they're not allowed to for environmental reasons because the trees there are too old or there's wildlife in there. It might be a protected area. Um, so if people kind of go in and build trails, but a lot of the stuff here would be more like cross country and natural trails, and it's just all rocks and roots, and you pretty much use what you have, rather
Mhm.
than building big dirt jumps or building anything crazy. Because we just like I suppose there are some spots like that, but they'd be very few and far between. I know one or two where they do have some pretty big jumps and gaps and stuff, but like that would literally be one person just taking it upon themselves. But it'd be nobody knows who it is, but like everybody knows where the trail is, kind of thing. And every now and again you might show up there and there'd be another little jump or another bit of feature added on. And but in the kind of cross country trails, there's a few times where you'd wrangle up a few friends and just come in and clear a section of the trail, or just cut back some of the bushes and the thorns and cut back some of the fallen trees and things like that, or dig a drain hole to let the rainwater get out and stuff. But I think the way it's done there seems like pretty sustainable. Like, as long as the
Mhm.
support is going and there's people there willing to put in the time, and at least then they go, oh yeah, no, I helped build this trail, I love riding this trail, rather than just, as long as you can get the attitude to, what do they call them, like no dig no ride days kind of thing.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yeah, it is interesting looking at, how sometimes unsanctioned trails will become sanctioned trails in that process. Sometimes they keep their same form and things aren't, modified too drastically, or sometimes they're modified pretty drastically.
yeah.
A lot of times depending on who the landowner is and what flies and what doesn't fly.
Hmm.
So yeah, it is interesting to see that process of things going from sometimes an unsanctioned realm to then becoming sanctioned one day. And I feel like most sanctioned trails were unsanctioned at one point a long
Yeah.
time ago. Um, so yeah, it's interesting.
And I've seen some of your Instagram posts as well of you riding, and like you seem like you're pretty able to send it on some of the big jumps. Um, and like you said, you're like a product of your environment. And I I used to ride a little bit of downhill, but even that would just be super rough, technical and steep. There wouldn't be any massive jumps or gaps. And there's one thing I never
Mhm.
really did a lot of. So like, do your local trails have kind of like beginner trails where there's small jumps that are all tabletops, so you're not kind of smacking into the back of a landing? And how, like, do you work your way up? Is it a bit kind of inclusive for everybody to learn, or do you kind of have to get thrown in the deep end and just go for it?
Yeah, yes and no, actually. I would say where we live is pretty good progression. There are some smaller jumps that you can, you know, do as many times as you want. You can even drive to them, which is really nice.
Hmm.
And so you kind of save your energy for the particular session if that's what you're working on, during that day.
Yeah.
And we do have, larger or middle size jumps and larger jumps. So I do think that there is kind of a step um, along the whole way, which is great for progression. I do think that there could probably be more of a middle ground because I have heard from various local people that they feel a little bit stuck where they're, working on this, or they feel dialed on these smaller jumps, and
Yeah.
how the heck do they get to these larger jumps? They don't really feel like they have
Hmm.
quite that middle ground.
Yeah.
So I think we could probably work on having a better middle ground for people to kind of bridge the gap between some smaller features and the larger features we have locally. But there are some, there is a little bit of a middle ground, but I think it could definitely improve. But as for access, I think we're really lucky in a sense of, like I said, you can drive to all of these different jump lines, whether they're small or big. So if you're really, really trying to dial it in, the access to them is really, really easy,
Okay.
and kind of conserve your energy and, work on whatever you're trying to work on, or that kind of thing. So you don't have to spend 2 or 3 hours climbing through the woods to then get to the jump line to then
Yeah.
practice something new and hard. You can kind of make your time pretty focused. So yes and no. I think we have a good thing for everyone, but it can always improve.
No, that's pretty cool. I can imagine though that when you're used to the small jumps, next thing you know, you're going from like easy to extra hard, and you're looking at this massive thing that you don't want to come up short, you don't want to overshoot it. It can be a bit intimidating. I know that, like, there's one or two private bike parks here in the country. None on my
Mm,
side of the country, but like when I say my side of the country, Ireland is so small you can drive across it in 3 hours. Um,
wow,
so it's not
that's so
really
crazy.
it's not really a big trek, but like you see that the local kids near that kind of private bike park where and it's not a huge hill, but they have vans and trailers, and you stick your bike up on the trailer and they uplift you to the top, and then you race down, and by the time you get down to the bottom, the van is there ready to bring you back up again. So you get loads of runs in, and these little kids, and like they're 12 and 14, early teens, and they're just shredding down these hills. It's crazy what they can do um, at such a young age, and even younger. Like, is there a lot of kids in your area? Like, do you see a lot of younger people cycling, or is it mainly kind of older teens or adults?
Yeah, we have a really, really great variety of age groups. We have a couple really great mountain bike schools in town that are kind of just building up an army of shredder kids. It's really cool. Um, recently I hosted a jump jam at our at one of our local jump lines, and I would say 90% of the people that showed up were kids under 15, which is
Wow.
crazy, but there was so many of them, and they were all so competent and so talented, and it was really cool to see. So I think we have a huge demographic of kids, yeah, getting all that repetition in and having really great, schools, mountain biking schools and programs to
Hmm.
go to after school or whatever to ride. And then, yeah, I would say we have a lot of, I don't want to call them older, but yeah, older, older people that are riding here too. So I don't think that it's necessarily specific to one age group here. I think we have a whole variety of age groups riding the same trail, which is, I think, pretty special.
And do the local schools, do they have their own cycling clubs? I know, well, like when you say that there's cycling schools, is that just the local group and a professional coach that get together to get kids into cycling or get adults into cycling and help them along? Or do the actual schools themselves have any involvement in it?
Yeah, the schools might. The mountain biking programs I see and know about are like private, so they're,
Okay.
extra, almost like extra curricular type things where parents have signed their kids up for a separate,
Yeah.
mountain biking school that's not necessarily associated with their elementary or middle school or anything. So I see it separate, but I bet that the schools probably have something like that intertwined, but I see them as separate
Okay.
entities. Yeah. Yeah.
And you said that you organize sometimes the kind of ladies' dig days so that they can learn how to build the trails. But is there a good kind of female representation of the mountain biking there? Because I know it's the percentage of women and girls cycling is quite small compared to the male side. But do you guys have good representation there, or can you see it growing?
Yeah, I think we have really great representation from my perception. I honestly see more women on the trails sometimes than
Yeah,
men, which is really sweet. And there's so many lady group rides through all the shops, which is also really amazing. So
cool.
if you wanted to, you know, do a female only ride, there's plenty of shops and different organizations that have women's group rides and that type of thing. So, yeah, I think we have a really great female representation, which is also really special. Man, I'm really talking up. Really talking up the river.
No, well, it's good to hear. Like I know just from what I've seen, like I wouldn't know about the numbers, but just what I've seen, really, that the mountain biking scene here doesn't have a lot of women or girls taking it up. But over the last while, I definitely have seen an awful lot more, especially even like
Mhm.
in the enduro races, and there was always a few people that you'd always see at all the mountain bike races. But it's definitely growing. But what I'm really seeing is a lot of like a pickup in gravel cycling, because
Mm.
it it's a good balance between the not as extreme as mountain biking, but you have that extra bit of safety because you're away from the traffic and the busy roads. So it's great that there's like when I was working at a bike shop, there the vast majority of people would be customers would be male, but like I could see over the years that it was growing and growing and growing, that there was a lot more women coming in and getting the bikes, and then they'd get into it through maybe their partner or a friend, or they just wanted to try it out themselves, and the next thing you know, they get another friend into it, and then that person loves it and they get another friend into it, and it is great to see it kind of growing. And like I suppose I don't really care if you're a man or a woman or anything in between, as long as you just enjoy cycling and get out and have a good time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think that there's always room for growth in, all categories. So I would like to see more female representation in like the jumping, I think, side of well, at least what I do, because I don't necessarily always have like a strong female presence in doing larger jumps locally. And I think there can always obviously be more women and men trail building. So I don't know.
Yeah,
There's always growth stuff like this too, but I think we get good representation.
that's good. It's good to hear. And just once people cycle, I'm happy out. Just share the love of cycling. So
Mhm.
being part of the Kona ambassador program kind of gave me a really big pool of people to pester and get to sign up for this podcast. So, how was it that you got involved with Kona in your cycling?
Yeah, mainly through other people, which is kind of cool. Yeah, just riding locally, I had a few people approach me being like, "Hey, you should maybe find a shop or a company to support you in your writing." And I didn't really put too much thought into it at the time, but I was like, "You know what? You're right. Like it'd be sweet to um look into that." And at the time I was riding a Kona Process 153, so I was like, "I'll look on Kona's website." So I got on Kona's website and they actually had an ambassadorship program, which was perfect. And then when I looked into it, it seemed like it was really based in storytelling and different type of projects like that, which intrigued me. So um, I was kind of attracted to the ambassador program through kind of, yeah, just that storytelling aspect of it, which I thought was pretty
Yeah,
special. I didn't necessarily, say like you needed to be first place in all these,
yeah.
rides or that. It was like, can you tell a good story? So that's what initially attracted me to the program. And yeah, I applied a couple years ago. I guess it's my second year doing it. And yeah, it's been cool to really have kind of some framework to make media and
Yeah.
create projects. And, yeah, it gives me like good initial framework to kind of create stuff and to tell stories and do different things. And Kona has also been really
Hmm.
supportive of kind of the events that I've done this last year with the female trail building party and the jump jam and that kind of thing. So, yeah, other people initially kind of pushed me to look into riding support, and then the Kona ambassadorship thing kind of came up through me searching for that.
Cool. And
Mm.
when you're out trail building, does the engineering side of your brain ever kick in when it comes to building lines and building jumps and stuff? Like, does it help you when it comes to building?
There's a little bit of crossover. Yeah, it's funny when we first started trail building, myself, my partner, and a few other people, we were like digging these like hot tub size holes on the side of the river to move dirt, and like a part of me was just like, this is so much work and so wrong, like. And then the light bulb kind of went off from an engineering aspect I had learned in school called cut fill, where it's really you're not moving any new material into the site or taking material out of the site because that costs money.
Hmm.
So you really got to be good and efficient and moving the dirt that already exists. And
Yeah.
now I had brought that up shortly into us, figuring out the trail building thing. And then the light bulb went off for everybody else. And they're like, yeah, that makes way more sense. So, and that's how, we've continued to do it. So there's a few concepts that have had some bleed over. But more or less the trail building thing has actually allowed me to tap into more of a creative side than a super analytical side. So it's been good for, yeah, tapping into a creative side of my brain that I don't always tap into.
And what kind of terrain have you got there to work with? Like, are you mainly kind of dry, dusty, or do you have proper forest land where kind of more clay and loamy stuff with rocks and roots for you to kind of build features around? What have you got to work with?
Yeah, we have a lot of good loam, I would say. So we have a lot of good dirt in that sense. We don't Where I typically build, there's not a lot of rocks, which is kind of nice because I'm doing everything by hand, and
Yeah.
rocks are take a lot of time to get out if that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want them there. Yeah, if you're trying to move rocks, it's a lot. It takes 10 times longer. So for the most part, I would say loamy type dirt is what we're working in. And we'll try to kind of avoid some big root systems if we can,
Hmm.
or incorporate them in the trail if we need to. But for the most part, just yeah, loam.
And does everything have to shut down when it rains there? Because I know in some places where as soon as you get any kind of bit of rain that the trails will get washed out if you keep riding. But over here, whatever kind of way, because we get so much rain here in Ireland, that like the composition of the soil stays fairly consistent. You know, it'll be a bit muddy in winter and it dries out in the summer. But like if you cycle in the rain, you're not going to rip the place to pieces.
Right. Yeah, we have kind of both. Because our local trail system that I was talking about that has a lot of jumps, it's such a manicured system that when it rains hard, tire tracks are not great for the trails.
Hmm.
So there does become a point when it's too wet and you're actually just damaging, trails that people have put a lot of work into.
Yeah.
But for more the natural stuff around, which is typically outside of that local trail system, some of the more like unsanctioned stuff or some of the drier stuff out east, because we turn into kind of a desert the further east you move
Okay.
from here. All of that stuff is pretty good to go when it gets wet. And even when it snows, if you really want to ride in the snow, you can.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would say all the natural stuff holds up pretty well, but it doesn't see as much traffic. And like I said, it is a lot more natural and doesn't get impacted as harshly by the rain that the local trail system does.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Okay. I suppose we can call it there. I learned some pretty cool stuff about your local area and trail building, and I just want to say thanks for giving me some of your time today to come on and have a chat.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it was fun learning about you as well. Appreciate it.
Thanks.